Bright Tuty. Every student matters.
Hi students, welcome to the session. In this session, we are going to talk about climate and the adaptations that we see in the animals. Now, we all know that understanding climate is important for us so that we can determine what kind of adaptations will the animals show. In your class 6, you have studied about different climates, or rather I should say different areas, and you've talked about the adaptations that you see in the trees and the animals. In this chapter, we are going to talk about only the adaptations of animals in the certain climatic areas, right? Now, before we move on, let's understand that climate plays a very important role in the types of animals that are found in an area. The animals are adapted in different ways to cope with the climate that is present and the condition that is present in a region. When we talk about climate of a region, climate influences the temperature, the availability of food, right? Availability of food, also shelter, right? And water. So these are certain essential things which are required by living organisms for their survival. That is optimum temperature, proper food, shelter and water. So depending on the climate, these things vary. Suppose if we talk about a desert environment, we see that the temperature is really high. The food availability becomes scarce because the plants are less. And then shelter again is something which is in a different ways the animals find shelter, and water is scarce. So we see the adaptation in the animals are to cope with such environments. In your class 6, you've studied about the animal that is camel, that is adapted properly for the survival in desert, right? Now, on the same basis, we are going to talk about different regions that are present all over the world, and we are going to talk about different animals and their adaptations which help them in surviving the extreme climates. When we talk about adaptations, these are certain features which are present in the animals which save them from the environment. There are certain behavioral changes which occurs in animals as well. Right? So when we talk about climate, we see that animals are adapted in different ways to cope up with the environmental conditions and availability of food in region where they live. Right? So we will find that different animals live in different regions, and they are best adapted for that particular region. Right, students? So we took an example of camel for the hot temperature. On the other hand, when we talk about the cold temperature, where the temperature goes below 0-degree mark, in those areas we see that the animal is adapted to cope with the extreme cold and keep itself warm. Such kind of region is one such region which is really cold is the polar regions. Polar regions, students, are the areas which are near the poles, right? So, polar regions are near the poles of Earth, right? So, what are those poles? One is the North Pole and other is the South Pole, right? So, these are the two regions, that is the North Pole and the South Pole. Other type of area or other type of region that we are going to discuss is the tropical rainforest, right? So tropical rainforest are the areas which are comparatively hot, and they receive a lot of rain. So polar region is cold area, whereas the tropical is the wet area and it is comparatively hotter. Right? When we talk about polar regions, like I said, it's near the poles, that is the North Pole and the South Pole. What are the countries that come under the polar regions? Let's understand that. Countries like Canada, Greenland, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, right? Finland, Alaska, this is in USA, then Siberian region, Siberian regions. These are the regions which we see are near the polar areas, right? Then when we talk about the tropical rainforests, so the countries like India, Malaysia, Indonesia, Brazil, Congo, Kenya, Uganda, and Nigeria. These are the countries which come under the tropical rainforest. We are going to talk about the animals that are in polar regions and in the tropical rainforest in this session, and we are going to compare the two. Once we understand that how different these animals are, right, we are going to understand the importance of climate on the type of fauna, that is the animals that are present in that region, right? Now, once we've understood what is the polar region and what is the tropical rainforest, let's do an interesting activity. It's a very simple and a quick activity. What you're going to do is you're going to take the map of the world and you are going to locate the polar regions and color them with blue color, right? Color it with the blue color, and you mark the tropical regions like these, right? And color it with red, right? And then what you will see that where exactly is the tropical area situated and where are the polar regions situated. I have already told you the name of the countries. It's a very simple and a very fun activity so that you are able to locate the areas where different type of climates exist, right? Now, once we've understood the importance of climate and adaptations, now let's talk about the polar regions. When we say, when we talk about the polar region, this is one of the extreme environments, right? So polar region gives one of the extreme climate. The temperature is really, really cold, and this particular area is quite hostile, right? So we see that the adaptations also are quite different in these areas. When we talk about the general climate or general environment on polar regions, there are certain points which we need to remember. First of all, polar regions is covered with snow all year long, right? So it is covered with snow and it becomes very cold for most of the year. So the temperature, it doesn't go up to 30 degrees Celsius. It's not moderately hot, nothing at all. It's cold, and in winters it becomes really cold, right? It is covered with snow definitely because of the temperature that is so low in these regions. One of the special features of this region is that in polar regions the sun rises for 6 months. That means there is always sun that is present for 6 months straight, and then there is 6 months which does not see the sunrise. That means for 6 months the sun is there day and night. When we talk about day and night in our terms, we see that the day starts maybe 5 a.m. or 4 a.m. in the morning, where we see the sun's light, and by 7 p.m. The sun sets and it is it's night time and it's dark. Whereas in the polar regions we see that the sun rises for 6 months. That means for 6 months it's a complete brightness, 24 hours. When we talk about the other 6 months when the sun does not rise, that means that it is dark outside for complete 6 months, right? So this is one of the major, you can say, very unique feature of polar regions. Then when we talk about winters, I told you the winters becomes really, really cold, and temperature goes as low as minus 37 degrees Celsius. So the temperature is so low in this particular case, right? Minus 37 degrees Celsius is pretty low temperature. When we think about this kind of environment, this kind of climate, it becomes really difficult for us to imagine life on these areas. But definitely life is present in these areas because the animals that are there have adapted themselves for surviving in these extreme climates. Animals like polar bears, and penguins are quite common in these areas. Both of these animals have special features which help them in surviving such climates. We are going to talk about both of these animals, and we are going to talk about the special features that they bear. Now, first let's talk about polar bear and the adaptation it has for the polar region. Polar bear is again a type of bear which remains or stays in the polar regions. One of the very important feature that we see is the white fur, which is not easily visible in the snowy white background, right? As you can see, this particular bear is white in color, and it is easily, it blends, this particular animal blends well with the snowy environment. If we talk about other bear species, they are usually brown or black in color, right? Whereas polar bear on the other hand is white, so that it can blend. Why it happens is because it helps its predator and its prey, why this happens is because the predator, right, and the prey are not able to see it, right? Because if the predator see it, that is also dangerous for it, for the polar bear, and it wants that the prey should not be able to see it, because so that it can hunt and obtain food, right? So the white fur helps it in survival and for hunting, right? Both of the things are important. Then next, what is there to, like we said, that the environment of polar region is very cold. So this animal needs to be protected from cold. For this protection, it has two thick layers of fur, right? So the polar bear has two thick layers of fur which keeps it warm in the cold weather, right? If we go to the polar regions, we are going to wear a lot of clothes to keep our bodies warm. Whereas the polar bears on the other hand have two layers of fur on them. If you remember, in class 6 we had talked about snow leopards, where we saw that the snow leopards had a covering of the fur on their body which kept them warm. In the same way, because polar bears are staying in the areas where the temperature drops down to minus 37 degrees Celsius, that is why we see there are two thick layers of fur in them. Apart from that, it has a layer of fat under the skin, right? This layer of fats help in the insulation, and it keeps the body from getting cold and keeps it warm. So you can see that two adaptations are directly for keeping the animal warm, because if this particular adaptations were not there, this animal will not be able to survive such extreme cold, right? So it has layer of fat under its skin, and this also helps in insulating the body and keeping the body warm. Now, if you look at this particular adaptation, we saw that how many layers are there for keeping it warm. There are basically 3 layers, right? What are these 3 layers? First is the fat that is present under the skin, right? And then there are 2 fur, right? So they have 2 layers of fur in. This becomes keeps the body so warm that the polar bear walks slowly and it has to rest, right? So why it has to do that? So that it avoids overheating of the body, right? So you can see how well insulated this animal is, that it has to rest for a while so that it doesn't become hot, right? So this is something which shows us that how well adapted the bear is for the cold environment. Apart from that, first thing is that these layers keep the body warm, and what happens is that many a times when this polar bear is chasing after its prey, it becomes really hot, right? Because obviously it has so much insulation, and because of daily activity or extreme, say for example, if he's running after a particular animal, so its body becomes so hot that it goes for swimming. So polar bear is a good swimmer. Polar bear is a good swimmer. There are 2 reasons for the polar bear to become a good swimmer, or it has adapted to become a good swimmer, because first of all, it needs to cool down its body after, say, a lot of physical activity, right? The other thing is that some of its prey, because it preys on fishes and seals, so these are found in the water, right? So it also preys on the animals which are living in the water, right? So that's another reason why it is such a good swimmer, right? Now, There are two adaptations which helps them in becoming such good swimmers is the wide paws that it has. So wide paws help in good swimming ability, and apart from that it can keep its keep its nostrils closed. That means that it is able, once it has air in its lung, it can close its nostril while underwater and can stay under the water for some time. Like I said, it also hunts inside the water because seals and some of the fishes which it preys on are actually in the water, right? So it can stay in the water for a long time, and these features help it in becoming a good swimmer. Then these wide paws not only helps in swimming but are also helpful in walking on the snow, right? So it has long sharp claws and wide paws which help in walking on the ice and on the snow, right? So it becomes easy for this animal to walk on the slippery surface of the ice and also to move on the snow. Now, apart from that, it has a very strong sense of smell, right, which helps in locating and catching the prey, right? So this is one of the feature which helps the polar bear in obtaining its prey, right? Now these are the adaptations that we see in the polar bear, and that's why we know why polar bear is such a successful animal and has been surviving in polar regions for so many years, right? So I hope you will remember all of these adaptations that are related to the polar bear and why or what purpose do these adaptations play. Now, another animal that we were talking about is the penguin. Penguin again is a very unique bird. Penguin is a flightless bird. Penguin is a flightless bird. That means that this particular bird cannot fly, right? This bird has to, because it cannot fly, it has to remain in this particular polar region, stay there for all and it has to survive during that cold. So this animal also has certain features which help them in the survival. So what are these features? Let's see that the penguin is also black and white, which helps in blending in the background, right? So this white color helps in blending in the background. Apart from that, it has a thick skin, right? Thick skin which helps in remaining warm, right? So this thick skin provides warmth to this particular bird, right? Apart from thick skin, it also has a fat layer which serves the same function, that is keeping the body of the penguin warm. Then what else? You must have seen that the penguins, they are, these animals, these birds stay together, they huddle together so that they can get the warmth of the body from each other, right? So to obtain the body warmth, these animals stay together, they huddle together, and in this way they keep themselves warm. Apart from that, as you can see, these birds are flightless. These birds are good swimmers. Why do they need to swim? The very first thing is because they feed on fishes, and that's why they need to be good swimmers. For this, for being good swimmers, they have streamlined body, right? We have seen in class 6 that why streamlined body is important. So they have streamlined body and their feet help them in swimming. So their feet have webs in them. So webs in feet help in swimming, right? Because of these features, they become good swimmers. These wings which have been modified into flippers also help them in navigating easily in the water, right? So these are certain adaptations that we see in the penguins. Apart from penguins, there are other animals also which are present in the polar regions. What are these animals? These are fishes, right? Different kind of fishes. These are musks, oxen. These are musk oxen. You will also find reindeers, seals, and you will find foxes. You will also find whales and birds. Now, birds, one of the bird, that is penguin, is a flightless bird, whereas other birds are not flightless. The difference between all these animals and birds is that, say for example, if we take the example of a fish is able to remain under the water, and they can stay underwater and they can survive even in the cold environment. But birds need to stay warm, right? So, like I told you that these penguins have thick skin, they have fat layers. So this makes this bird very heavy. And this is one of the reasons why it's flightless, right? Whereas other birds, when we take the example, are not flightless. So they need to stay warm. And what they do to stay warm is that they migrate, right? So what